When me and my wife were dating, we broke up one day. And I say one day because we were separated for 8 hours, 8 whole hours that we broke up. And it was one of those things, and men, you'll understand this, it was break up with her or ask her to marry me. And I chose first to break up. And so we broke up. And 8 hours later, it was miserable. A friend of her called me, and she wasn't happy, and I wasn't happy. And her friend talked me into coming back to her. So I called her, and I said, you know, can I come back over? And she says, I want flowers. And I said, okay. So as a good college student, I went to the grocery store, because college students don't go to flower shops. We go to grocery stores. I went to a grocery store, and I looked at this bouquet of wildflowers, because that's what she liked. And next to it was a plant. I guess it's some kind of an ivy. I don't even know what it is. I know it grows real long strands. And when I saw the plant, I thought, I got an idea. And I didn't buy the flowers. I bought the plant. And I showed up at her door, and I knocked on the door, and she opened the door, and she gave me that look like, why are you holding a plant? And I said, oh, let me explain. I could have bought you flowers, but they were cut, and they'll die. But I've learned today that if we're going to have a love that lasts, we've got to water it, we've got to nurture it, we've got to take care of it. And if we'll water and nurture this plant and take care of it, it will grow just like our love. Doesn't that sound great? She shut the door and said, I want roses. So I went back to the store and got roses. But those roses are dead. That plant is still hanging in our living room 15 years after we got married. At least now it's got moved back to the living room. We lived in Wilmington, Delaware. It was hanging in the bathroom. I didn't know what that meant about our marriage, but our plant was in the bathroom. But that plant is a symbol of our relationship. And we water it, it grows, and we take care of it. It continues to grow, and every time we move, I make sure that plant's taken care of, because I'm scared to death to find out what happens if that plant dies. And so I try to pay attention to what happens with that plant. Now, we talk about the relationship of vegetation. Vegetation, it feeds us. It gives us oxygen. It also gives us joy and beauty. There is nothing more beautiful than a field of flowers. I've been married to my wife long enough. I like the look of wildflowers. It's gorgeous. My mother-in-law grows roses. She grows roses in her backyard, and they're gorgeous. They're beautiful. And it is a beautiful thing. Vegetation treats our senses, our eyes, our smells. There's something about the smell of fresh cut flowers. There's something about the smell, and any of you from the country, you'll understand what I'm about to say, of fresh cut hay. I love the smell of fresh cut hay. I grew up in Texas. And I used to love it when they would harvest the hay, and I could drive through the fields and smell that. And it's a smell I long for today. I love it when I get to go back somewhere where there's hay, and I can go out in those fields and smell that. It's a treat to our senses. And what God has done here is God has created this relationship concept where He's saying, look, all of these things are going to build together for us. It's going to build together for man. They're going to work for us. We are a mirror of that relationship.
To build on that, the relationship mixing with the perfection. I have a picture here of a trophic level. When the sun breathes down on us, on the flowers or the vegetation takes part of that sun. It's almost to 100%. So 1,000 kilocalories and will come into the plants. Well, then you have insects that may eat those plants. Only 1/10 of that energy that the plants got from the sun transfers then to these insects. Well, then a rodent comes by, a secondary consumer. A rodent comes by and eats those insects. Only 1/10 of the energy that the insects gained from the plants does that rodent get. And then an owl comes by, and an owl sees that rodent and picks it up and eats it. Then that owl only gets 1/10 of what that mouse got, of what that plant, or of what the insect got, of what the plant had. And so the further away we get from the vegetation, the less energy we get. And I believe, that goes back to Daniel. When Daniel told the guards that, I don't want to eat of the king's feast. I want my men to do this thing, and to where we're only going to eat vegetation. And they were healthier. They had better stature because of that. And I'm not an advocate of be a vegetarian, because I love a hamburger just as much as anybody. But you can see how the quote unquote perfection of God had with energy for us, as well as for nutrition, because the closer we are to the bottom of this pyramid, the more energy we're going to obtain.
Exactly. Now, the last thing that I want to look at today, the last thing that I want to share, is actually something that Mike shared with me, and I thought it was so fantastic. And if I was a generous pastor, I would let him share it, but I like to hog the microphone. But Mike sent me a text earlier this week, and he pointed out the fact that we are land. That we are like land. That we can do things, we can make things, we can think of things, we can create things, and we can absorb water. But the water is all through the Bible, is a representation of Jesus Christ and His power, and a representation of the Holy Spirit. And in John chapter 3, he talks about the everlasting waters, and he begins to share how that He is the everlasting water. And when we begin to absorb the water of the Spirit and begin to absorb the water of God, we become fertile. We go back to being that story of the farmer and the seed. We become that fertile ground, and we've absorbed the water from God. We've absorbed the nutrition from the everlasting water. And we can produce the vegetation, the fruit, that is our witness, our testimony, our relationships. We begin to reproduce those things in other people and in other places. Why? Because we are being fed from the water, and we are sprouting forth as the land does. The thing that I'm noticing day in and day out is that all of the days of creation point to us. We talked about the first day. Let there be light. God is the light. Nothing happens without God. Then we talked about the firmament, which is a protective level that was around the earth. It is the sky, and it was even more in depth than it is today. And that protection we talked about last week being the law. That is a perfect protection. But when that protection fell because of the sin of man, God sent His Son, Jesus Christ, to become that shield around our lives, so that we are protected from this world because of the sacrifice that Jesus gave. And today we begin to see that we are the vegetation-producing, fruit-producing land that God created on day 3. So we're seeing this repeating cycle. And as we close today, I want to encourage you one thing. I want to encourage you to look and see, what kind of land are you? Sin has brought a shifting of the plates, if you will, into our spiritual landscape. And there are some places and some people who have become very fertile. But because of the harshness of the world, there are some people who have become stony. They've been hurt. They've been hurt by churches. You may be here today. You may be watching on the internet. You may be watching on the internet because you don't go to church anywhere. Because you don't want to be around those hypocrites at church. Because somebody's hurt you and your heart has become like stone. Well, I got news for you. If you let the water in, it can change that stony heart. It can make a way where there seems to be no way. Some of us, we have got so secure in who we are and what we do and our systems. And I like systems. You ask the people on my staff, I like to do things in a systematic way. But we get so secure in our systems that we